Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. We're diving right into Week 8 of our NGO Management series, and today we're tackling the absolute lifeblood of any nonprofit, fundraising and resource mobilization. As future leaders in this space, you're going to realize pretty quickly that having a noble mission, well, that's really only half the battle. We need to talk about the complex financial engines that actually make that mission possible.
Because out in the field, real-world impact literally starts with resource mobilization. It's a pretty powerful reminder of why we do what we do, right? Before we can go out and deliver vital services, empower communities, or advocate for major policy changes, we have to master the art and, honestly, the science of securing the resources to actually pay for that fieldwork. Without a fully fueled financial engine, even your absolute best-laid development plans simply remain plans on a piece of paper.
So here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with the NGO funding landscape, then look at managing donor relationships, dive into restricted funds and overhead, tackle the ethics of fundraising, and finally, wrap up with how to mitigate donor dependency risks.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the NGO funding landscape, diversification and survival.
There are essentially three core engines that power an NGO's budget. First up, we've got institutional grants. This is your money from government agencies and massive foundations. Second is individual giving, donations from everyday citizens and philanthropists. And third, earned income, which means charging fees for services or maybe selling products. Now, while those institutional grants usually bring in the largest chunks of money, it's actually the earned income and the individual donations that give your organization its most crucial asset: absolute flexibility.
Think of a healthy, diversified funding portfolio like spreading your bets. You're spreading your financial risk across these different slices. So if government funding suddenly dries up tomorrow because of some unexpected policy change, your individual giving and your earned income are right there to keep your programs running. Spreading risk across these different streams is exactly what protects your organization from sudden devastating financial shocks.
And honestly, the stakes couldn't be higher here. Consider the really sobering cautionary tale of a New York nonprofit called FEEGS. They provided incredibly vital services to some of the most vulnerable people in society. But after reporting a totally unexpected $19.4 million loss, which was partly due to a lack of agile revenue diversification, the entire organization collapsed. It just goes to show exactly why funding diversification is a non-negotiable for survival. It isn't just some nice-to-have best practice, it's essential risk management.
Moving right along to Section 2, managing donor relationships, cultivating the ecosystem. When it comes to donor relationships, we can actually look to Kelly's 4 strategies of stewardship as our guide. First is responsibility, which simply means keeping your promises to the donor. Second is reporting, being completely 100% transparent with your program information. Third is reciprocity, actively listening to and thanking your stakeholders. And fourth, continuous relationship nurturing. You have to remember, people donate to people for causes. That post-donation engagement, it's just as critical as the initial ask.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth do you manage genuine relationships when you have thousands or even tens of thousands of donors? Well, you leverage technology. Artificial intelligence and predictive analytics are absolutely revolutionizing donor management right now. AI can track donor behavior, personalize your outreach, and even predict exactly which lapsed donors are statistically most likely to return if you target them with a specific campaign. It's a total game changer because it allows you to scale that relational fundraising without ever losing the personal touch.
All right, let's get into the financial weeds a bit. Section 3, restricted funds and overhead, the strings attached.
Here is a fundamental financial mechanic of the NGO world that you absolutely must understand. Not all money is created equal. Restricted funding comes with major strings attached. It's legally bound to a very specific project. Misusing restricted funds isn't just some minor accounting error, it is a literal breach of a legal contract. Unrestricted funding, on the other hand, that is the ultimate prize. That's your discretionary capital that the board and management can use for general operations, unexpected emergencies, or jumping on sudden new opportunities.
So naturally, there's a highly nuanced managerial approach needed for these restrictions. Board-restricted funds, donor-restricted funds, and contract-bound funds, each of these demands totally different managerial and accounting treatments. A truly savvy NGO leader knows exactly how to navigate these different categories. The goal is to maximize your operational flexibility while, of course, maintaining strict legal compliance across the board.
Okay, let's talk about the dreaded O word, overhead, or indirect costs. We're talking about expenses that benefit the whole organization, like your IT infrastructure, your HR department, the executive leadership team, and we really need to dispel a toxic myth right now. Overhead is not wasted money. It's just not. We need to reframe it entirely. Overhead is the essential, full-cost recovery required to maintain the organization's infrastructure and its actual capacity to deliver on its mission.
But I will say, there is a bit of a dark side to overhead. The literature points out a pretty harsh reality about the pressure of keeping the lights on. Sometimes, when a massive, fully funded project finally concludes, organizations literally choke on the idea of reducing their scale. To maintain those massive overhead structures they've built up, some NGOs will artificially inflate their budgets, or worse, they'll start chasing totally irrelevant new projects just to keep the funding flowing. It's a dangerous trap, and you must avoid it.
Which brings us to the most complex part of our discussion, Section 4, the ethics of fundraising, navigating the minefield.
I want you to imagine this real-world scenario for a second. You're a fundraiser. It's month 11 of the fiscal year, you are way behind on your quota, and your core programs are suddenly facing devastating cuts. Out of nowhere, a massive donation is offered. The catch? It's from a heavily tainted corporate source with an absolutely terrible human rights or environmental record. Do you accept it? It's tough, right? The intense pressure to hit that financial number can so easily lead to major moral compromises.
So how do we navigate this? Well, we can use 3 academic frameworks for ethical evaluation. First is virtue ethics. Ask yourself, does taking this money actually reflect the moral character of our institution? Second, feminist ethics. By accepting this gift, are we associating our NGO with the very oppressive power structures that harm the people we're trying to serve? And third, utilitarianism. What are the long-term negative consequences on our public perception and our future fundraising ability? As a leader, you have to critically evaluate every potentially misaligned partnership through these exact lenses.
The crucial takeaway here is this. Evaluating your fundraising staff solely on dollar quotas breeds moral corruption, period. Bringing toxic, for-profit, commission-based pay structures into the nonprofit sector is a complete recipe for disaster. Why? Because it heavily incentivizes egoistic abuses, it promotes mission-blind solicitation, and it encourages taking money from the wrong people just to hit a completely arbitrary financial target.
Let's wrap up with our final section. Section 5, mitigating donor dependency risks, achieving true sustainability.
So how do we achieve true, lasting sustainability without selling our souls in the process? We have to proactively prevent the organization from becoming a puppet to its largest financial contributors. Look, relying way too heavily on a single bilateral donor or one massive foundation can lead to a really dangerous phenomenon known as mission drift. This happens when an NGO slowly begins altering its core objectives, and really its very identity, just to please the funder and keep that money flowing. This kind of donor isomorphism essentially turns independent organizations into mere contractors for the wealthy.
To fight back against that, you need highly actionable governance strategies. Think of this as your checklist as future executive directors. First, implement strict gift acceptance policies so you always know exactly when to say no. Second, legally cap the percentage of your operating budget that any single donor is allowed to contribute. Third, relentlessly launch campaigns specifically for unrestricted funds. And finally, build out robust earned income ventures so your operations aren't solely reliant on the whims of charity.
I want to leave you with a provocative final thought to really carry with you, both through this master's program and into your future careers. Ask yourself constantly, are you changing your mission to chase the money, or are you finding the money to authentically fuel your mission? Your ultimate job is to build resilient, ethical financial structures that will outlast their founding grants and truly serve the communities you represent. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.